our webinar directly. So, what is PCI SSC? So, PCI SSC is nothing but the body made by five payment brands, namely Visa, Discover, Mastercard, JCB, and Amex, which is American Express. Now, we'll think why PCI SSC. Okay, so PCI SSC basically stands for PCI Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council. But why? So first and the foremost reason is consistency and the standardization. So before PCI SSC was formed in early 2006 or 2004, these payment brands were having their own compliance or let's say cybersecurity requirements. So if you are doing with Visa or if you are doing with Mastercard, if you
Hello?
are a service provider or a merchant, then you have to comply with Visa cybersecurity guidelines, Mastercard as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying when before PCI SSC was born, Visa and Mastercard were having their own cybersecurity guidelines. So if you are a merchant or a service provider and you are dealing with Mastercard, Visa, or any of these service brands, then you have to comply with the compliance or the cybersecurity guidelines for each of these brands. So this was causing much of the problems because yeah, one waiver was okay with Visa, the same waiver or the same gap with Mastercard was not okay. So there were much of the buzz in the market that how we can do business with all of these payment brands. So then these five payment brands, those were the major payment brands. They came together and they formed PCI SSC. And the first and foremost thing that took care of was the consistency and the standardization. So it was created to establish a unified and consistent set of security standard for payment card industry. So and it builds standardization as well, that yeah, whatever Visa is agreeing, Mastercard is also agreeing on the same, because the standard remains the same. What is the standard, we will see. Okay, so collaboration in the industry trust. So when these all payment brands joined together, they build trust and the collaboration, and they brought their own experiences, own cybersecurity guidelines. They collaborated together. They made one standard that is called as PCI DSS. Okay, so that's why PCI SSC was born, and it helped merchants as well. It helped service providers as well, where and if you comply to PCI DSS standard, that means you are complying to Visa guidelines as well, you are complying to Mastercard guidelines as well. And what is now PCI DSS? So PCI DSS stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. Okay, it is a set of basically controls that is designed for the industry that are involved in storing, processing, or transmitting of the account data. Okay, so either you are storing it no matter what in a clear text in encrypted format, you are processing it for some kind of payment, or let's say any request that has come to you, uh, chargeback, something like that, or you are transmitting it, you are taking the card from the consumer and you are transmitting it over a channel. It can be point to point, it can be MPLS, it can be over the internet, IPsec, whatever. Then you come into the scope of PCI DSS and you have to comply with PCI DSS standard. Okay, account data is equal to cardholder data and the sensitive authentication data. Later we will see what are these two terms. Now let's first deep dive into what is into initial assessment. So initial assessment is before even going into the gap assessment phase. Let's do organization has decided yes, we will go for PCI DSS standard because we fall into category like we are storing, transmitting, or processing the cardholder data. So let's do initial assessment where we are. So the first very step into initial assessment is identifying the key stakeholders. When it comes to key stakeholders, you start within your organization itself. Who are responsible for managing, processing, or transmitting of the cardholder data? This may include your IT, your compliance domains, finance departments, and whatnot. So you have a list of your departments, and then you start collecting those information. So identification is the first step. Then comes defining the CD boundary. CD is card data, cardholder data environment, where your cardholder data either gets stored, transmitted, or processes. So you have to define those boundaries. Where should your card go, or where your cards are going? Okay, which department? Basically, again, it may flow through routers, it may flow through firewalls, databases. Okay, it may be going to finance department for some kind of chargeback or something like that. So those terms comes into picture here. Okay. After defining the boundary, asset inventory becomes most critical part, because without assets, nothing is possible. And yeah, this is the first step where you start putting down anything on the paper, basically writing down the asset, databases, servers, firewalls, everything through which card is going, basically within the boundary of the CD. And finally, classification of the data, whether the data is cardholder data or sensitive authentication data, or is it a data that can impact the security of the cardholder data, or the sensitive authentication data. So that's where the data classification comes into picture. Then determine your network boundaries. So once you have asset in place, your asset inventory is there, now you determine from which devices or the assets your data will flow. So that's where you define your network boundaries over there. And then you do the data flow analysis. So you have your CD boundaries defined, you have your network boundaries defined. Now you draw the data flow diagram and do the analysis. Yes, my data is flowing from this server to this database via this application, via this switch, this firewall. Then comes the vendor assessment. It's not only you, because in identifying the stakeholders, there would be some of the vendors as well, who would be your interested parties during your initial assessment. Why? Because yeah, you do not do entire gamut of the thing yourself, but after doing certain activities, let's say storing, transmitting, or processing of the cardholder data, okay, you need to send the data somewhere for the next action. Those will be your vendors. Okay, if you have any, or directly you are transmitting through Visa and Master. Visa and Master, those will not be treated as vendor, because yeah, those made the PCI console. But other vendors, like let's say Paytm, let's say HDFC Bank or something like that. And then you have to do the analysis whether your vendors are also compliant to PCI DSS, or what format they get the data. They are getting it a hash format, or they are getting it in a, let's say. Then we have to document the scope. So you have to document the scope, basically. So you have your asset, you have your network boundaries, you have your data flows, you did your vendor assessment. Now you have entire picture over there, which determines what can be the scope. Because everywhere where the card is flowing up and down, okay, and left and right, those will be part of the scope. Now you have to document the scope, that yes, this is my PCI DSS scope. So that comes as a part of PCI DSS initial assessment and the scoping. So now your scope is defined. Now when you have your scope, then we will fall into next step. But before going to next step, let's discuss the card. We are talking about multiple things, but what will come as a part of scope when it comes to when you're defining your CD boundaries and all. So first and foremost thing here is the PAN. So it's the 16 to 20, sorry, 12 to 19 digit character, mostly 16, okay, that you see in the front of your credit card or debit card is PAN. So it lengths varied from 12 character to 19 character. Most common PAN is yeah, of 16 character. Here in European countries, I have seen PAN with 19 characters as well. I have never seen a PAN of 12 character as of now. But yeah, and just additional information. Then you see your name there. You see your expiry date. Then you see the CVV number, basically CID in case of American Express. So it is printed in front of the card. That's 4 character. Okay, and then at the back of the card we have CAV, CID, CVC, CVV2. All are same. Okay, three digit number, basically depending upon all payment brand which terminologies they use. This is for the authentication. Okay, Then you have a magnetic stripe over there that has three tracks, basically track 1, 2, and 3. For payment, majorly track 1 and 2 are required. Okay, majorly track 2 is required. If track 2 fails, then the fallback mechanism is track 1. And then finally, you have the signature panel over there. On front of the card, there is a chip as well, where and all the data that is in the magnetic stripe is presented in this chip in a secure format. Okay, so basically when you insert this chip, rather than the magnetic stripe which doesn't provide any security, the chip provides additional security, because the chip mutually authenticates itself with the terminal as well, right? So yeah, that's where the chip comes into picture. It has a track equivalent data. So track equivalent, that means track 1 and 2 equivalent data in chip with some additional information for security. That's why the chip card were introduced, because they involve public and private key cryptography, wherein they can mutually authenticate the terminal. Now, talking about everything and not discussing this slide because this is the most important slide, will not make any sense. That what is coming under cardholder data and what is coming under sensitive authentication data. So the cardholder data comprises of the primary account number, the cardholder name, the service code, the expiration date. Now, sensitive authentication data has full track data, that magnetic stripe that I showed you, track 1 and track 2. Then we have authentication data, CAV, CVV, CVC to CID, and then PIN and the PIN block. So, what is PIN in the PIN block? PIN is the 4 digit or the 6 digit that you type as your authentication when you insert your card in the terminal. Okay, PIN block, whenever you enter your password or the pin on the terminal, it doesn't travels as it is. Rather, some padding value is added and then it gets encrypted, and that entire thing encryption with encryption is called as pin block. So that comes as a sensitive authentication data. Now let's see what can be stored and what cannot be stored. Okay, so permission of sensitive authentication data is not permitted at all. So SAD, basically sensitive authentication data, is not permitted to store at all, but you can store SAD till you authorize the payment, either positive or negative, that you are going with the transaction or a bank is going, you are allowing the transaction to happen, or for some reason the authorization is failed, and then you decline the payments. Okay, so either you approve or decline the payment, till then you can store SAD. So authentication data can only be stored till the transaction is authorized to be performed. It can be declined or it can be approved. Now comes to the part of cardholder data, wherein everything is allowed to be stored except for the PAN, which is allowed to be stored, but you can only store PAN when it is unreadable, when it's rendered unreadable. Okay, and there are four ways that are defined by PCI DSS through which you can render it unreadable. Number one is encryption. Number two is tokenization, truncation, and hashing. So with these four methods, you can render your PAN unreadable and you can store the PAN as well. Okay. Now, after initial assessment, we know what are a stakeholder, what is our scope, and yeah, boundaries, data flow, and all blah blah things we have. We know what comes as a part of card, what is CD, what is non-CD. Now is the time to perform the gap assessment. The first stage is the preparation, wherein you gather relevant PCI DSS documentation, including the current version of PCI DSS standard, SAQs, whatever is applicable to you. Okay, we know that there are still two standards of PCI DSS that is live, and audits are still happening on both the standards, 3.2.1 and recently came 4.0. Okay, so in the preparation stage, you decide whether you are going for 3.2.1, you are falling in level 1 compliance, or you are a level 2 service provider or a merchant, wherein you have to deal with SAQs, self assessment questionnaires. Okay, those kind of stuff comes as a part of preparation. Then comes interviewing the stakeholders. So when you do, you have your list of stakeholders. From the initial step you start interviewing them, that yeah, whether they know the PCI DSS compliant, whether they know their responsibilities, what they are doing, everything. Those kind of interview you start taking, depending upon which team works into which department. Interviews can be held by internal compliance team, whosoever is the internal audit, uh, but this should be independent. Okay, and this goes in conjunction with reviewing all the 12 requirement. Yes, we know that PCI DSS has 6 goals and 12 requirements. So we have to interview stakeholders, plus we have to review all the 12 requirements. So it's not only 12 requirement, but when you go into control wise, or let's say requirement wise, they are I think around 300 plus things that you have to check as per PCI DSS standard. And then obviously you have to document the finding. So whatever gaps you have identified by reviewing, by interviewing the stakeholders, you have to document those findings formally. And then you have to agree with the stakeholders. It's not like you have documented it and the stakeholder says no, I do not agree with this, I have some XYZ mechanism in already in place, something like that. Agreement is very much important, because yeah, only after agreement the remediation phase will start. Okay, and once you agree with all the findings and the gaps with the stakeholders, reporting becomes even important, because the senior management will be interested to know where you stand when it comes to PCI DSS assessment. Okay, so you have to document all the findings, including report can contain a high level overview that yes, this goal or this requirement has 6 findings, this goal and this requirement has 7 findings. Kind of those step, those report you can make, and then finally you can have a detailed report as well, that what these are the gaps that have been identified. Now, as we know, there are two standards when it comes to PCI DSS. Those are live as of now, with PCI DSS 3.2.1 that you see at the top is going to expire in March 2024. But still, if any organization that is that has been certified for, let's say, this 3.2.1 in on till March 31st, okay, then again they have to go for 4.0 in next year, that is 2025. So still 3.2.1 plays a very big picture and still very important. But yeah, all those 3.2.1 and 4.0 have same goals versus the same 12 requirements, just the wordings have been changed. So let's see you know these goals are. Okay, so when you see all 1 to 5, they have multiple requirements into them. Okay, on the left side you see in the bold is the goal, on the right side it's the requirement under those goals. So yeah, so the first one, which says establish and sustain a secure network, that's the first goal. So this involves installing, maintaining firewall and secure configuration, and keeping the security software up to date. So basically, it's all around the network and the systems. How you apply, what kind of configuration you should apply, blah blah blah. Those kind of stuffs come into goal number one. Now you have to protect the cardholder data, or let's say you have to rather protect the account data. Okay, that we discussed earlier as well. So organization must encrypt the card holder data during transmission, storage, and implement access control restriction around that. So basically, that's to basically to protect unauthorized access to let's say yeah, even if somebody gets the data is unreadable, so make the data unreadable. Okay, the third one talks about the vulnerability management, basically regularly updating, patching, okay, and developing the secure applications. So kind of those stuff with requirement 5 and 6. That's goal number 3. Goal number 4 talks about all the access control, basically on a need to know basis, on let's say uh, on a logical access basis, and the physical access basis. So basically assigning unique IDs, trying to avoid generic IDs unless required or approved by management. Okay, multi-factor authentication, see from where to where you are jumping within the network, controlling that flow as well. Okay. Number 10, number 5, basically requirement number 10 and 11. Goal number 5 talks about regular monitoring and testing of the network. Yes, obviously you have implemented all the requirement, but that's of no use if you are not testing it. Okay. So you have to test and monitor all the thing, basically conducting vulnerability assessment, okay, NTPs, incident management, kind of those stuff, everything, so that you can monitor and test. And finally, you have to maintain a policy so that all these requirements from 1 to 12 can be governed. So overarching policy wherein you can say, yes, my PCI DSS standard, or my organization that complies with PCI DSS standard, this is the overarching policy. If you look at this, you will get to know how we are complying or what we are doing to comply with PCI DSS. So this overall goal from 3.2.1 to 4.0 remains the same. Yeah, some controls have changed obviously because 4.0 brings up more maturity. uh, 3.2.1 is still is very important. So number one is still valid, and it builds the base for 4.0. So understanding of 3.2.1 should also be there when it comes to PCI DSS standard versus 4.0, which when you will read, you will get to know, okay, 3.2.1 is builds my base for 4.0. Moving ahead, now we know we have the gap assessment report. We know the goals. We now know the 12 requirements or the 6 goals. The report is also ready. The management has reviewed. Now, what's the next step? Next step is remediation. In the remediation step, the utmost important thing is understanding the deadline. So why deadline is important? Because once you are dealing with card relevant data, or let's say sensitive authentication data or cardholder data, you are already against the deadline wherein you have to comply with the standard as soon as possible. So if you are a merchant and you have a governing body, or let's say service provider, small or big, doesn't matter, okay, then the body above you will already be forcing you to get compliance, or get yourself compliant to the PCI DSS standard. So yes, understand the deadline, since till when you have to close the gap. Okay, then you have to prioritize the gap. So it's not like, yeah, the obviously you will go for the low hanging fruit, but let's say there is a big gap in the system where in your entire system, server, application, code, whatever you think is not looking good or not in line with PCI DSS compliance, then you have to prioritize those as well. Where in a special let's say group uh, who works on those technologies needs to sit and make a project plan that how we will close this gap. So those are the prioritizing the gaps. There is one tool as well which is available from PCA Council, that's called prioritizing approach. You can utilize those tools as well, wherein all the requirements are listed over there, available obviously free of cost in PCI DSS website. You can utilize that tool as well. Using that tool to prioritizing the gap can also be done, or you can always have your customized ones. Okay, do a cost benefit analysis. Now it's not like you should always go for the costly solutions. Okay, yeah, PCI DSS is 100% compliance, but it does give you a little bit of leverage when it comes to, let's say, compensatory control or something like that. So you do not need to implement the complete set of all the standard, rather for few controls wherein you feel, okay, I have few compensatory controls in place, I can put those control, rather not complying to control mention control directly, but I'm meeting the intent of the requirement. In that case, you can think of a cost benefit analysis, whether you are going for the intended control or intended mechanism to resolve the gap, or you are doing a cost benefit analysis and you say that, yeah, these controls can suffice and can meet the intent of the requirement, and then you start putting those controls instead of the actual one. Yeah, ROI is the main thing. That's what the organization look for. So yeah, Why not do a cost benefit analysis? And cost benefit analysis will also come into picture when you do your risk assessment. So obviously where there are gaps, those gaps needs to be put into your risk register. Okay. And yeah, you know how risk management works. In the end, when you go to the risk treatment, before risk treatment, what you do a cost benefit analysis and think of the other controls. So that's what will help here as well. Okay. Now, once you have done the cost benefit analysis, now the gaps are prioritized, you know your deadline, identify the controls that needs to be implemented. Okay. So you have the gaps versus the controls. Now you have to identify about, let's say you have five controls. Okay, this one is best suits with this gap. Let's go and implement that one. So you have to identify those controls per gap. And after identification of control, let's say five for database, five for IT, five for monitoring team, five for incident management team. So these are the five gaps. Okay, you have to assign the responsibility. Who will be doing it? Okay, because without assigning responsibility, yeah, the entire project plan, or let's say the remediation will look scattered. Okay, so that's why assigning the responsibility becomes very much important, and most experienced guy, or let's say most responsible guy, should be assigned responsibility. And not only with specific let's say technology like IT, databases, compliance, but there has to be someone at the top who should be looking around this entire process uh, for every department within the organization, so that he should report to the management on a timely basis that yes, this department is doing fine, this department needs attention, this department requires money to implement the control. So this is responsibility within the department, plus there has to be someone overarching this entire process of remediation. Then it comes for implementation of the control. So once you have assigned the responsibility, everything is laid down, the foundation is there. Now implement the controls. That's how you move up in the ladder here. Implementing each and every control that has been decided in the identification phase itself. Identification of the control, you start implementing within the deadline, keeping the deadline always in mind. So deadline is something that you should always keep in mind. The sooner the better, because the penalties with respect to PCI DSS is very high. If there is any breach or delay or something like that, Visa, MasterCard will not even listen to you anything. They will start imposing penalties. So penalties are very high when it comes to PCI DSS. Okay. Now you have implemented the controls amongst every department. Your remediation plan is complete. You have closed all the gaps. Now it's time to test the control. So if you will not test the control, how will you get to know that whatever you have implemented, identified, is working as per plan? Okay, so now you have to test it. Depending upon, yeah, it's a database, it's a firewall, it's a server application, what kind of test is required as per PCI DSS standard. Obviously, we will not design our own control. It will always work in line with PCI DSS standard requirement number 11. You have to test the control and monitor the control over there. 10 and 11 requirement that talks about testing and monitoring of the control. Is it working as per uh, design? Okay. And finally you will close the gap, basically the report that has come to you, and you will report to the management that yes, my gaps are closed, here is the evidence, I have tested it as well, we are well within the timeline boundaries as well. Now I consider my gap to be closed, here is my report. And finally the overarching person will look at the evidence, who is working independently obviously. So he will close the gap, and he will report to the management that yes, this department or this person has finished his uh, responsibility, and he has closed all the gaps within PCI DSS as per PCI DSS requirement, which falls for his department. Uh, we have done everything. We have done the initial assessment, we have done the gap assessment, and now we have done the remediation. We know all the 12 gaps, 12 requirements, what can be stored, what cannot be stored. Now is the time to go into the next step. So this is not where the PCI DSS stops. Now you see how big this PCI DSS is. Even with after remediation, it doesn't stop. Next step is engaging a QSA. Who is a QSA? QSA is Qualified Security Assessor. So there are QSA organizations within, let's say, every part of the globe. Okay, and those organization sponsors few people. Okay, who can go and give or take QSA exam. Okay, because and they can be called as Qualified Security Assessor, and they are the only one who are responsible to certify your organization, or let's say attest your organization that you are in compliance with PCI DSS. So to be a QSA, you need to get yourself into QSA organization, and then you have to take a QSA exam, PCI DSS QSA exam conducted by PCI Council, and then you will, if you pass, you will be called as Qualified Security Assessor. Okay, and then only you can go and do audit for organization who, whatever organization employ you as a QSA to do audit for themselves. Okay, and then once you engage the QSA, what is your next step? Prepare for the assessment. Obviously, you have your report, you have assets documented, you have your scope documented, you have everything, you have closed the, so you start preparing for the audit. That's the final audit I'm talking about. Okay, start by prioritizing on everything. Okay, now after you have prioritized, there comes the assessment process, wherein depending upon, yeah, on-site, remote, whatever audit, and that mode of audit is preferred. Mostly if it's a level one merchant, or let's say level one service provider, those qualify for on-site audit. That means QSA will come to your premise, and he will audit your organization, basically the CD or the scope part. Basis that he can prepare his report. So he will come on site. That's if only if you are a level one merchant or a level one service provider. What are the levels? Those we will talk about during our training. That's upcoming. I'll highlight you about that as well. Then finally, let's say the assessment process is carried out. The QSA reviewed all the 12 requirements within your organization, and he also find, yeah, even you closed all the gaps. He also was able to find something like yeah, minor gaps or major gaps, something like that. Yeah, mistake can happen, that yeah, the gap was not identified by your organization, but it was highlighted by a QSA. Even then, QSAs are flexible. Yeah, audit has failed over there because yeah, it's a final audit. Still, there is a gap, but every QSA is little bit flexible. They give you some time, that 7 days or 15 days within the audit. You have to close that gap, and you have to report to the QSA that yeah, I have closed the gap. Here is the evidence. So yeah, that's flexibility is there over. At least when I was a QSA, I was giving those flexibility to my clients. That yeah, you can close the gap within 7 days after the final audit, and you give me the report or the evidence. Okay, so yeah, then finally closing the gap, you will provide the evidence to QSA. That is also very much important. Either you can keep your evidence with yourself, you can demonstrate that evidence to QSA. The only thing is that whatever organization keeps the evidence has to maintain the evidence for a period of 3 years, because PCI Council can come and PCI Council can ask for those evidences. So if you are sending the evidence to a QSA company or to the QSA, now it's his responsibility to maintain that evidence for a period of 3 years. Okay, so let's say if you are having audit on 15 September 2023, then for next 3 years till 2026, okay, 14 September 2026, you have to maintain the evidence of this particular audit. Okay, so this is how the evidence part works. And finally, once the QS is satisfied that yes, everything is closed, this organization has no gaps, because PCI DSS has yeah, required to be 100% compliant. There is no like yeah, basis risk, we are accepting this risk or something like that. No, not at all. PCI DSS is always 100% compliance. Once the QSA is satisfied, he will give you attestation, basically that is called as AOC, attestation of compliance. And the QSA that that an organization, sorry, the QSA to which he is associated to, that organization will also give you a certification that, yeah, something for branding and all. So, but the only document that matters to PCI Council is the attestation of compliance, that yes, this uh, organization is certified to or attested to PCI DSS. So what PCI Council is interested in, or the other, let's say, other payment players like merchant or service provider who are above you are interested in, they are interested in AOC, okay, attestation of compliance. So this completes from, initial gap assessment to achieving the certification phase. Now PCI DSS is not, I would say, one time journey. It's a continuous process, okay. So by continuous compliance, it means that when you will go into in-depth, a requirement, one by one, or controls one by one in the PCI DSS standard, you will feel that there are certain activities that you need to carry out daily. There are certain activities you need to carry out on a weekly basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis, half yearly basis, and yearly basis. So it's not like one time show that yes, you have come, you are compliant to PCI DSS standard, then yeah, the game is done. And also this is only valid for 1 year. So every year, this from initiation to gap assessment to engaging to the QS and getting the report, this is an annual process. So every year, so it's not a easy compliance to achieve. It's not an easy standard to achieve. In-depth understanding of this standard is very much required, especially if you are going to, associated with one of the, companies, and you will do, QS, you will become QS, and you will do auditing and all. So thorough understanding of this standard is very much required. And when I said every day, that means security log should be reviewed every day. That these are the few example. Weekly basis, I could take example of file integrity monitoring. That file integrity monitoring software should check, should run every week, so that you can check which files have been modified without permission or something like that. On a quarterly basis, vulnerability management, okay, you have to check that you every, let's say, if you are doing uh, any vulnerability management activity on 1st October, then in December 31st, that's one quarter where it ends, your that report is null and void. Then on 1st January 2024, you have to again run the vulnerability scan. Yeah, plus minus 5 or 10 days happens, but yeah, you have to maintain the quarter after quarter. It should not happen that yeah, you have to present 4 reports to an auditor, and you do after all the 4 reports at an interval of 15 days. No, that's not going to work. It has to be every quarter. So that's how the seriousness comes into, implementation, organization, or the organization who's dealing with PCI data. And this SS report, repair and report, that is from identifying to scoping to everything, so that your scope is up to date, your assets are up to date, okay. And then you do the gap assessment, okay, and on a timely basis, that can be 6 months, or let's say every quarter. And then you do the reporting, so that management should know either you are in line, or or you are moving away, uh, in the away direction, what is required by PCI DSS standard. And they can bring you back on the track, so that every gap is closed before again, before the next year comes into, and yeah, QSA comes again to for the audit again. So yeah, you have to be in compliance with PCI DSS standard every time, every minute, every second of the year. That's how the continuous compliance work. Yeah, the highlighting. So this was it. A little bit highlighting on the summary. But yeah, we studied what is PCI SSC, why PCI SSC existed, what were the challenges that merchants and the payments brands were facing during uh, during early phase when PCI SSC was not born. Then we studied about PCI DSS where it is applicable. Basically, any entity that is storing, transmitting, and or processing the account data, that is card order data plus sensitive authentication data, will fall into the gamut of PCI DSS, and they have to comply with PCI DSS. Then roadmap from initial preparation phase till achieving the compliance, basically leaving the AOC and the certificate. That was our roadmap end to end. And then element involvement payment, basically, yeah, over which entire PCI DSS runs, basically chip, pan, magnetic stripe, CVV expiration date, okay, track one, track two, those things, and continuous compliance and why it is important.